welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the session STEM Community Lunchtime Conversations. My name is Jeremy Babender, and hosting with me today is Beth Nickel from Arizona Science Center. The topic for today's discussion is forest fire, mitigation, ecology, and education. We all understand how devastating forest fires can be to the environment. Every year, it seems as though there's another destructive wildfire in the West, and it's even bigger than the one before. This year has been especially bad season for forest fires, with Oregon, Washington, California having some 7.5 million acres burned, making it West Coast worst fire season in the last 7 years. So today's discussion, really relevant, will address these issues, and really we can discuss how to mitigate forest fires and provide information that can help us be more aware and make better standards of forest safety.
Hello, everybody. We have a few special guests here today with us to share their knowledge and experience in creating fire-adapted communities, understanding the beneficial role of fire in our landscape, and how a warming climate and fuel buildup foster severe wildfires. Our presenters for this session are Kirk Webb, Community Risk Manager from Timber Mesa Fire and Medical District, Chris Jones, Extension Agent, University of Arizona, Healy County Cooperative Extension, and Pete Fuel, the Regents Professor, School of Forestry with Northern Arizona University. So thank you all for attending this session to share your expertise with the group.
Kirk Webb will start us off. He's the Community Risk Manager with the Timber Mesa Fire and Medical District.
Just some basic history. I'm in the White Mountains up here in Arizona. We're, our elevation ranges from, the low desert, high desert, 5,500 up to 7,500, 8,000 up in the higher elevations. But anyway, back in 2002, when we had the Rodeo Chetasky fire, you can go to the next slide. Just some basic history on that. It was the largest wildfire at that time in Arizona, and just shy of 500,000 acres, 491 structures burned. You can go to the next slide. I don't think people were actually really interested in looking at, what forest fire, how devastating it can be until that occurred. Once that occurred, now you can go to the next slide. We started seeing a change in people's thoughts and attitudes. So those last pictures are basically just kind of showing some of the devastation of the Rodeo Chetasky fire. But once that occurred, now all the people started thinking about, okay, what are we going to do, because we don't want this to. It got super close to Show Low, went through Heber Overguard area, and that's where most of the structures were burned in that area. So it got people starting to think, okay, we need to do something. In fact, one of the towns up here, you actually had to get permits to actually cut trees. And so their thought process started changing after this. You can go to the next slide. So what I was mainly going to concentrate on with this topic was, some of the different types of collaborations that we work on as far as, being able to mitigate. And because honestly, if we don't take care of Mother Nature's going to come in and take care of herself. And in a lot of cases, it's not a pretty sight after the fact, which we saw with the Rodeo Chetasky fire. And then in 2011, we saw the Wallow fire, which then became the largest Arizona fire at that point, going over 500,000 acres, which is all right here in the White Mountains. So because of a lot of those things occurring, that's where this 4FRI project, the Forest Restoration Initiative, came in. And so you can see on this slide here where it covers all the different fire districts or not fire districts, but the forest areas with the Apache Sitgraves National Forest, and it covers, extends over 5 counties. So that's been huge in being able to thin out a lot of the Forest Service areas. Also the reservation BIA and those areas, they've done a really good job of doing the same kind of processes. I don't have a picture of what that entails, but on the Fort Apache Reservation, they've been doing a lot of work in the same thing, which is kind of leading up to into the areas where our communities are: Show Low, Pine Top, Lakeside, Heber Overguard. Those are affected because they're on the leading edge of those towns where the fire comes in. So there's been a lot of work. Now how do we get local people involved? So if you can go to the next slide. So several years ago, we started getting into the working together. So we work very well and closely with Pine Top Fire because we cover the exact same town. Our boundaries are even so odd, people don't even know. Like, for example, we have the school in Lakeside, that's in our fire district. Right across the street is the theater, and that's in Pine Top Fire District. So it's really kind of crazy where the boundaries are, but as we look at it as fire districts, we want to send the closest resources, regardless of whether it's fire or medical. So, because we want to be able to provide the quickest response to whatever the emergency might be. One of the things that we've done is this Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. So we've gotten very involved with doing Firewise. After the Rodeo Chetasky fire, that's when I started seeing a lot of, and we started doing those Firewise classes, becoming Firewise certified to go out and assess properties. And we have if anybody in our district wants us to come and assess their property and let them know what it is that they can do to make their home more defensible, we go out. That's one of the things that I actually do as part of my job. I do that. If we go to the next slide, probably about, it's getting close to 8-9 years ago now, my chief came to me and said, we need to create a red tag, green tag program. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's no way I want to do this, because during the Rodeo Chetasky fire, we had fire districts or fire departments that were coming up to help us, and they were assessing some of the local areas in town that might be affected by the fire coming through. And they were red tagging and telling the residents that, oh, if you got a red tag, we're not going to defend your property. So when he said, I want this red tag, green tag, I'm like, oh my gosh, who's going to take the calls? It's not going to be chief, it's going to be me. But what I did is I took the Ready, Set, Go program, and actually I made all these bullet points that you can see on here. And we typically will print these onto door hangers. But the wording is really virtually the same, other than until you get down towards the bottom, where on the red one it says your property has been identified as a concern for reasons noted above. The other one says your property has been identified as defensible, but there's probably still things that they need to do. And so we check off the things that need to be fixed. And what we do is we send a crews out to different areas every year. So kind of early spring, they go whatever area they're assigned to, because it's virtually impossible to get the entire district every year assessed. It's very time consuming for the crews, and they still have to handle emergency calls as they're doing this process as well, plus hydrants and everything else we assign them to. So that first year when I sent this out, I knew I was going to get tons of phone calls of people mad saying, you're not going to defend my property? What the heck? But actually, I was very impressed to see how many people actually started cleaning up their properties. I saw lots of loads going to the dump or the green waste facilities that we have. And calls were coming in of, hey, can you come and tell me what I need to do to make my home defensible and things like that. So this program really it was kind of an eye-opener for me to see the collaboration and the welcomeness from the community, and just gives them an idea of, because I think people were overwhelmed and didn't know where to start. This gives them a really good idea of where to start from. And so it's been very beneficial in my opinion. You know what? If you want to just skip down to that next to the last slide, because people still have access to this, all the different people that we work with, you can see right there. So if you got questions, like I say, people have access to these slides, and sorry I took over time.
I mean, it can just get lost in the information and what you have. It's just really exciting world that you're part of, and we don't hear about it. I don't hear about it much at all myself, and it's really eye-opening just to see how you can work with the community to really be part of the common cause. So thank you for talking about that. To add to the conversation next, we have Christopher Jones. So thank you for being here. He's an extension agent from the University of Arizona Gila County Cooperative Extension Office. So thank you, Christopher, for being here today and telling us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I appreciate Hope having reached out to me and given me an opportunity to participate with this STEM group. I'm new to it, and so I'm really looking forward to getting to know you all. As I go through this, I'm going to be following the slides that I have on my computer, so just please move forward as I go. So this opening slide, I just want to introduce myself, Chris Jones, University of Arizona, Gila County Cooperative Extension. I'm introducing the Arizona Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network to you all. And I also want to recognize my colleague, Ann Matek, who leads Matek Consulting and Flagstaff, and she's very active with the fire community up there and leads our Arizona Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. Next slide. So quickly, what is the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network? It is a national network of practitioners, researchers, and land managers working to build wildfire resilience capacity in fire-prone communities. Next slide. So when we all participate in informal and personal networks, the people you know and interact with are your network of friends, colleagues, and partners. But there are also more formal types of networks that are specifically organized to lead to certain kinds of outcomes. So the FACnet exists to support and connect practitioners working on community wildfire resilience. Next slide. So it's been around for a while now, and this just kind of shows you where the Fire Adapted Communities Network is active. A lot of our leadership comes out of California, Northern California. Our first group got started with the Greater Flagstaff Forest Partnership. You can see that we have several informal affiliate members across Arizona. In particular, our main partners are in Flagstaff, Prescott with Powwick, Pine Top Lakeside area. Really good to have Charlie here today. Work closely with Chief Jim Morgan on that program. Next slide. So who are we? And so when people think about networking, they often think about passing out business cards and social networks like Facebook. But when we are talking about learning networks, we're talking about a structure and a system that is designed around certain principles and values. So like I mentioned before, FACnet works to demonstrate and broadly disseminate practices that improve community wildfire resilience and provide value, resources, and support to our members to advance their FAC work locally. And members commit to learning together and taking action that will advance fire adaptation in their communities and the communities of their peers across the United States. So a little bit about being an affiliate member. Particularly, we're looking at organizations and individuals who are engaged in fire adaptation. So you see fire departments and conservation districts, several different partners. But so if you want to do more than get information, if you want to make connections and share what you know with other practitioners, you can join this network as a member. Joining the network is a simple online application process that allows us to get to know you and your work and onboard you into the network systems for communication and sharing. And we welcome individuals and organizations actively working on fire adaptation to join the FAC net as affiliate members. So at this point, I want to just show a few slides from our state website. And just here we go. As the Arizona Fire Adapted Communities Network, we're looking to connect practitioners, align the way that we're working together and how we're trying to fight fires, learning from each other to become adapted communities, and then help to produce products that we're able to share with each other. Next slide. So some of the benefits of membership. The membership allows active fire adapted community practitioners to connect with other professionals who are working on wildfire resilience and adaptation issues, access the FAC related relevant resources and tools, share experiences with other practitioners, work with state leaders and decision makers, and meet and learn from others through statewide events, conferences, and meetings. Also at the website, we've got a list here of certain products that are available for download as you see they're useful to you. One effort that the Greater Flagstaff Partnership put together are these kiosks that they have at Fort Tuthill. I put together this Ember Aware poster that came originally produced out of University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. And so these are things that you can access as well, even whether you're a member or not. We've got it available right there. Another resource that the group put together is this is just part of a newspaper insert. So some flyers that you can put in, raise people's awareness of dealing with wildfire and issues. And finally, just want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you all. Last year, we had a meeting with Western Extension Foresters that I work with and had a hike through the Pine Trail and just had a wonderful time with each other, learning from each other.
Thank you again for being here. And I love the work in terms of it talks about the interconnectedness and how you're learning from each other as a community of practice. And that's a lot of the work that we do also in the STEM space of building a STEM ecosystem and working to build STEM hubs around the state. And it's exciting just to see the parallels of what the industry that you're in is doing the same sort of work around fire and prevention. So thanks for sharing that information with us. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's great to be here. And I meant to say, Kirk, thanks for your presentation, the work you guys are doing up there. And I know Jim pretty well. Thanks for the leadership you guys provide.
Well, so next and a final speaker is Pete Fuel, the Regents Professor of the School of Forestry in Northern Arizona University. And that will round us out today. Really awesome presentation. So thank you again, Peter, for being here, and take it away.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Pete Foulet with the School of Forestry at Northern Arizona University. And it's interesting how in Kirk's presentation, he focused on a specific region and community, and then Chris kind of brought us to a broader level across large parts of the country. So I'm going to start off with a global perspective, and maybe these things can all be a bit complementary. This is a summary of the 10 hottest years on record around the world, and the last 5 are the hottest 5. And that has actually been the case for quite some time now, because of each year that passes either sets a record or comes close, ends up in the top 5 globally. And that has a lot of impact on fire regimes and on vegetation all around the world. Now, oh, I'm sorry, I can't move the slide. So next one, please. How does this translate into what we see in terms of our own climate and then the weather that influences specific fires? This is our precipitation trace at Flagstaff from our Pulliam Airport weather station. And you can see it goes up and down a lot. There's an awful lot of variation in southwestern precipitation. But if you draw a line through the middle of it, that line is pretty flat or even slightly rising. But next slide, please. When we look at the temperature trace here in Flagstaff, we also see fluctuation, but now we start to see a pretty strong trend. And there's a line drawn all the way through it that shows almost a 2 degrees Celsius increase in the last 70 years. And actually, if you dissect it a little bit further down, it would be the mid-1980s when the line really starts to deflect upwards. And this has been the case across the whole west of North America, that beginning in the 1980s, we see increasingly warm temperatures. And you might think, well, if the precipitation is still the same, kind of that's what our records show in Flagstaff, that we shouldn't necessarily be getting drier and thereby having more fires. But in fact, as it gets warmer, that helps water evaporate more effectively. So we find that fuels are getting drier, fire seasons are longer. Certainly, all of us in Arizona this October are experiencing some extraordinary periods of very, very hot temperatures. And so that all facilitates the spread of fires. Now, all the weather and climate data we've looked at so far, none of this is a prediction for the future. This is what has already happened. So this almost 2-degree increase is where we are now. When we look to the future, if you could do the next slide, please. Oh, sorry about that. Next one. This is a comparison of what two of the possible scenarios from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, kind of the world consensus on future possibilities for climate, show. So there are different degrees of climate change, and those are showing in the boxes on the right-hand side. The one that has about a 2.4 degree Fahrenheit change is a relatively mild form of climate change. Currently, we're on track to exceed that. But if we were to follow that path, then the average temperature that we currently have in Flagstaff would be suggested to be more like the average temperature in Gallup, New Mexico. And even the picture shows that there are some trees around Gallup, but it's 500 feet lower, it's warmer than Flagstaff, and does not have the same kind of a forest. And then at a higher extreme, in a more severe climate warming scenario, Flagstaff would be like going down 1,600 feet in elevation to the types of annual temperatures that we see in Prescott. And if these kinds of changes happen, the mechanism by which the vegetation would change would be fire. Next one, please. This was our most recent severe fire in the central part of northern Arizona, the Museum fire, relatively small, but one that burned very close to Flagstaff, was very concerning here. Next slide, please. This comes from work by colleagues here at NAU and with the Forest Service, using satellite imagery to go back to the mid-1980s, that time when temperatures started to go up, and look at the number of fires, the burned area, the percentage of high severity fires. And the details here aren't that important, but the trend lines are all going upwards. And many of these graphs have exponential scales. So we're looking at the natural log of the increase instead of the increase itself. If we showed the increase in actual acres, it would be a much steeper curve. Next slide, please. So the thing that I want to close with is, in this context where climate is an important driver of the way that fire regimes are changing in the Southwest, what are some of the steps that we can take? Well, one step that we can take is to try to reduce fuels. At our local level, community, state level, we have limited impacts on the factors that drive global climate change, although that's not to say that it's not important for us to try. But our fuel situation is much more directly in our control. And so the use of prescribed fire, the thinning programs like the Forest Restoration Initiative, these are important steps to try to reduce the severity of fires. The Hualapai tribal lands from northwestern Arizona are shown in this picture because Hualapai is a singular example. The Hualapai tribe began burning in 1960 and now have a 70-year record of reintroducing relatively frequent prescribed fires, surface fires, into their forest, which can certainly have a protective effect. And finally, the bottom picture is some of our college students talking with third graders in the Flagstaff Festival of Science. And this kind of outreach and education, reaching out to younger generations, about the importance of forests, forest ecology, climate change, and fire is a way that we can try to contribute in a positive manner. So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you so much. It was really awesome to just get that overview. And we already have a question that's come in. So Kelly Green asked, what additional suggestions do you have for communities to do to prepare for fire season in regards to the effort and restoration after a fire? What is the process? So I don't know if Peter, you want to address that, or Christopher can go as well. So Peter, maybe you start if you have an answer for that one.
Well, I could throw in kind of a big picture answer, but I think Kirk and Chris have more experience with some of the details of how communities might want to respond. But here in Flagstaff, I would say that our goal is certainly on a season by season basis. So you have things like restrictions on using fire in the woods, whether through smoking or machinery, things like that, that are really logical. But what we really need to do is prepare not season by season, but year by year, decade by decade. We need to have a large comprehensive plan in place. And that's certainly what the Forest Restoration Initiative and other similar projects. We have a smaller scale Flagstaff Watershed Protection Program. These are trying to operate all through the year to try to reduce fuels and reintroduce fire.
Kirk or Chris, did you want to address the question as well?
Kirk, why don't you go ahead and take that? I'm pulling out some resources I'm going to put into the chat box that will help answer that question.
So honestly, what we've been successful with is one, getting out in the community in that early springtime with that red tag, green tag, or, I've actually used the Ready, Set, Go educational program, having access to get that out to people. That's been our biggest driver in being able to get people to, and like I mentioned earlier, it's just, letting people know where to start. Because I think they get overwhelmed and don't know, because when Firewise first came out, the concept they were using, well, you got to have so much basal area. Well, common people, I still have an issue with trying to figure out what basal area means. So it's so much easier to bring it down to, and one of the things that I use when I'm talking to people, I ask them if they've ever grown a garden. And when I make the comparison between garden, because most people understand that concept that you got to pull the weeds out. Well, we live in a big, huge garden. So we need to go in there and trim out the ladder fields. We need to cut down, get rid of the ones that have the diseases, the bug kill, whatever the case might be. And people understand a little bit better when you put it in terms they can understand.
Well, thank you for addressing that. Hope, how are we doing on time? We probably should transition to breakout?
Yeah, if we can. It looks like, Mark, did you want to say something? I saw you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one thing. Have you, dealing with this fire, I'm sorry I'm running late. I'm coming in from another Zoom meeting. Have you guys worked with any of the indigenous nations on fire suppression and fire control? When I was in Idaho, I had a colleague of mine that worked on that, the traditional ways of fire control and stuff and suppression. And they did it the traditional ways of how they did fire burning, just to make sure they did certain fuels and certain things. Have you guys had a chance to look at those particular articles or contact those indigenous nations about that?
This is Chris. I work next to the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation.
Okay.
My colleagues over there are pretty active with their forestry program, as well as just trying to keep the wildfires under control there. We've had some situations with the non-native invasive grasses, the winter grasses, just really carrying some fires recently.
Right.
And so particularly in the communities where you may have some juvenile fire setters, or they work very closely with the community to try to keep those weeds under control and work with the youth to, have more useful.
Okay.
Anyway, I work with Pi Steel on that, and just.
Okay. Hey, well, Mr. Jones, get a hold of me. I'll put my email in the chat. I do need to get a hold of you. I work at San Carlos as well. I am with their IT over there, and I'm also going to be teaching next semester over there an environmental biology course. So I need to get with you on that. Sorry to interleave, but this is something important that I just thought I should bring up because there are actual articles on that.
Go ahead. I think Pete had something to add too.
I was going to mention San Carlos as well, where they have used managed wildfires to burn very large areas and achieve fuel reduction and improve the resilience of the forest to severe fires. The Wallapai tribe also, which I mentioned briefly in the presentation. And then there is increasing interest among other tribal nations in the Southwest too. So I think there are people around who would be interested in talking with you and forming a network. I can look for I see your email on there as well, and I'll write to you also.
This is Kirk. I know we do the same thing, working very well with the tribal entities. Fall time is when we do a lot of prescribed burning in the whole area, not only on the reservation, but on the forest lands, the state lands as well. So that's a common thing with us up here.
Well, then I want to take one final question, then we'll go to breakouts. I think it relates with, I think Beth, I really like the question related to the educational programs and materials. You know, back in the day, she recalls there being programs in elementary schools talking about fire prevention. Are there educational programs now that address this? And who would be the K-12 partners for this? And I don't know if that would be Christopher, you know, with the network. I don't know if that's, I don't know which of the speakers knows, or maybe we don't know.
Well, I'm willing to help promote that as well. I work with UFA's early academic outreach, so I'm willing to help out that in that manner too, Chris, with the middle schools and high schools and getting that to certain educators as well.
I think we've got some work to do. Let's follow up on this. We can find some resources and try to help you out with that.
There we go. People are starting to come back. Welcome back. Awesome. Looks like everyone is back with us now. We hope you had a great conversation, and I hope those guiding questions were, you know, able to give you something different to think about, get some new resources, and have a good discussion. So what I thought I would do, or what we would do, is love to do a quick share out from each of those breakout rooms and see what some of those main topics were. So Michelle, do you want to go first for your?
Certainly,
for
I
your
can
room?
do that.
Thanks.
Yep. So we had, we were blessed to have Kirk with us after his presentation, so that helped us steer the conversation a little bit. We talked a lot about what are the impacts of forest forest thinning on climate change, and how is thinning communicated to the importance of thinning, reported to community members. And so we had a really good discussion on how things are currently done and potentials for what might be done. And so we have both Lauren and Kirk provided information on what's being done for communicating thinning and how important it is, and helping people understand that it's not like felling trees on your property and changing the structure of the forest, but being fire safe. And so we do have links for like Forest Energies, who are using the pellets for biomass to make pellets for wood stoves. And if there are any other companies out there that are using byproducts from forest thinning, that's a great resource that we might be able to help promote. And so if you can add information into the chat, we would greatly appreciate additional information on that.
Awesome.
And same with education materials. Where do we find education materials for K through 12, for community residents, and you know, bring more outreach. And like Mark Clytus of U of A, early academic outreach, would love to see more Native nations integration of traditional ways of fire suppression. And so that would be a great way to include additional outreach.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. It sounds like you guys had a really robust conversation and it was nice that you had the experts in the breakout room with you. So thank you for sharing that. And I know we're at time, so I'll just do one more. Douglas, do you want to do a quick share out?
We were also fortunate in that we had Pete Foulet in our group, along with Richard Wrights, who is a diamond in the rough. Actually, he's very polished. He's had decades work as a fire boss in the field. So he just named and rattled off a million resources that have to be compiled and share out. And then I gotta say, Melissa, and you also have a CSO with Kelly Green's group, Fritz. While young people, they had some awesome suggestions, and that included particularly Melissa's volunteerism for efforts to help, for instance, folks that are elderly or are unable to help clear away fuels from their structures and homes, particularly up in the rim country. Terrific suggestion. So there you go.
Awesome, thank you. And Fritz and I will look forward to going through those Google Sheets and compiling all the amazing suggestions that you all had and resources. And we'll make sure to email that out, all the resources, the presentation, and the recording of this to anybody who registered. And then of course, feel free to share it with anybody else outside who didn't join us today. So again, special thank you to our presenters for joining us today and your wealth of information, our amazing moderators. We always appreciate you. So in 2 weeks, on October 29th, we'll be talking about the current state of advanced manufacturing. So that'll be our next STEM community lunchtime conversation. So in the follow-up email, there'll be a registration link for that. So we'd love to see you back. If you ever have any suggestions about other topics, please feel free to email myself or Kelly. We're happy to take those and find some presenters for those topics. So thank you all again. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.